All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us. They're really an incredible daf. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Meir and Rochel Gold, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Yonah, Tzvi, Ben Yosef, Chaim, Elazar, HaKohen, and to thank Noam Leah Efron for dedicating the shiurim and drashos this month in honor and celebration of the 98th birthday of Noam's grandfather, Yosef Hershel, Ben Mordechai Halevi. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors today, Steve Goloskov, for a refuah sheleimah for Steve's father, Nachum Sender, Ben Eta Rochel, who is having surgery today. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, he will have a complete and enduring refuah. And we'll say with that, let us begin. One last important piece of information is a very special welcome back to David Schwartz, who Baruch Hashem is never left this year. He's just been on Zoom for the last year and a half. And Baruch Rofei Cholim, your refuah should continue. Emir Hashem, we should be Zoch Emir Hashem to continue to learn together for many years to come. Also, with that, let us begin. We have a next couple of days. We have some really exceptional and incredible Gemara ahead of us. If your Shir Chaverim are not here yet, it's kedai to text them, to tell them that whatever tainug, whatever enjoyment they're getting from Shema right now, from sleep, it's not going to be the same as the tainug from this incredible sugya. So with that, let us begin. Really incredible Gemara. Va'arba prakim ha'olam nidon. The world is judged at 4 different intervals. The Gemara says, the Pesach ala tvua, the world is judged regarding wheat, regarding grain, on Pesach. Ba'atzeres al peros ha'ilon, by Shavuos, the world is judged regarding the output of fruit of the tree. And Rosh Hashana, kol ba'ei olam ovram mufanav kibnei maran. And on Rosh Hashana, all the inhabitants of the world pass before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kibnei maran. Now we'll see that there's a 3-way machlokas as to how to go ahead and define that term. Shin Amar Hayotzer Yachad Libam Hamevin El Kol Maasehen, which literally translated means HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates them all together. He understands all of their actions. Again, we'll see exactly what the meaning and deeper profundity of that pasuk is. Ubechag Nidon Al Hamayim, and on Sukkis we are judged regarding rainfall, regarding water. So therefore, I will say what the Mishnah introduces us to this idea is that the world is judged at 4 different intervals. And the idea of the 4 different times is that obviously each of these times of judgment corresponds to whatever it is that is occurring in the world at that particular time. So grain is beginning to sprout, Pesach time. Therefore, the world is judged for grain at Pesach. We'll see what Shavuos and fruit trees have to do with each other, because Shavuos, the carbon, and remember again, on Pesach, the primary sacrificial thing, right? Avoda that's done is the carbon omer, barley, which is the first grains. We'll see exactly the connection between Shavuos and first fruits. Rosh Hashana, again, day of universal judgment for mankind. And Sukkot, which is the beginning of the rainy season, we are judged for rain. Incredible Gemara. So we'll say, let's go. We're going to analyze and pick apart each of these items. So it says the Gemara, Hey Tvua. So when we say that Pesach is the time that the world is judged regarding grain, which grain is that referring to? So the Gemara, what do I mean by that? Ilema ha Tvua de kaima. So I'll say, remember again, by the time Pesach rolls around, there is already grain that's grain. So let's say, for example, it's the year 5782, right? This year, right? Tafshin Pei. So it's 5782. So now Pesach is going to come this year, 5782, and there's grain that's already growing in the field, right? There's already grain that's there when Pesach comes along. So the Gemara says, when we say that Pesach is the day of judgment, is the Rosh Hashana, or I should say it's the day of judgment for grain, which grain? Hey Tavua. Ilema ha Tavua de kaima. If you want to say that it's the grain that is already in existence in the field, kol hani harpaski da adu Allah emas istun. So when was the initial judgment of that grain which was already growing? Ela tvua de mizdara. Rather, it must mean that Pesach is the day of judgment for the grain that is going to be planted. So the Gemara says, Lememra dechadina. So you're telling me then that grain effectively has 1 day of judgment. So in other words, the way the Gemara is setting this up is essential, which I think kind of is intuitively the way we thought from the Mishnah, is that essentially comes Pesach is the day of judgment for the grain that is going to be planted. To which the Gemara says, are you telling me then that grain has only 1 day of judgment? But Tanya, we learned, Tvua she'ira bakari o ones, if something happens to the grain, right? Something happens to the grain. The grain is somehow, Rashi says, kari kigon barad o shidafon, like hail, right? Or some type of flood. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Kodem ha-Pesach, if the grain is impacted before Pesach, nidonis l'sha'avar. That means that's part of the judgment of last year. La'achar ha-Pesach, if something happens to the grain after Pesach, then what? Nidonis lahaba. Ultimately, that's an impact of next year's, or what we say, the present year. So I'll say what that means is as follows. If something happens to the grain, let's say this year, chas v'shalom, something happens to the grain, let's say in Adar Beis, we attribute that judgment to last year's Pesach. But if something happens to the standing grain, right, let's say this year, but it happens after Pesach, then we attribute that judgment to what? This year's Pesach, which effectively means that every grain has really what? Two judgments. Because we'll say, if you think about this, by the way, right, the grain is planted, most grain is planted after Pesach and is harvested after the following Pesach. So what the Gemara essentially is saying is, there's essentially 2 days of judgment for every year's crop. There's the Pesach before it's planted, and it's the Pesach before it's harvested. So the Gemara says if something negative happens to the grain, if it's after last Pesach, then ultimately again, if something happened to it, I will walk backwards. If something happened to it before this Pesach, that's the din from last Pesach. If something happens to it after this Pesach, before it's harvested, that's the din in this year's Pesach. Similarly, the Gemara says, the same idea, Adam, we'll say to a person, same concept applies to a human being. Adam she'ira bakari o ones, kodim yom kippurim, nidon l'sha'avar. So I'll say same idea. If something negative happens to me this year, this coming year, before Yom Kippur, right? The Gemara says, Kodim Yom Kippurim. So that din is attributed to last year's Yom Kippur, right? Or to last year's Rosh Hashana. Which I will say something very interesting. In other words, the way the Gemara is suggesting over here that din works is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu passes a din on me on Rosh Hashana. We're going to get into this. Rosh Hashana is the day of judgment. See, interestingly enough, the Gemara's understanding of this for now is that judgment begins this year Rosh Hashanah and essentially goes through next year's Yom Kippur. Next year's judgment begins after Yom Kippur of next year. Or to illustrate this again, right? On Rosh Hashanah 5781, last Rosh Hashanah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided what's going to happen to me. That din extended from Rosh Hashanah 5781 through Yom Kippur of this year, 5782. So therefore, the Gemara says, if something happens to me between last year, Rosh Hashanah 5781, and this year, Yom Kippur 5782, that's part of 5781 judgment. But if something happens after Yom Kippur 5782, then what? That's part of Rosh Hashanah 5782 judgment. In other words, which is interesting. We're going to see that not everybody subscribes to this model. We're not so focused on this, on human judgment right now. What we're much more focused on is grain judgment right now. And to illustrate to us that essentially grain really has 2 judgments. Pesach of last year, Pesach of this year. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Amarava Shmamina Trade Dine Mistana. You see from here that grain, in fact, is subjected to 2 judgments. So Rabbi said there is the judgment of the grain before it's planted. That's Pesach of last year. And then there's the judgment of the grain before it's harvested. That's Pesach of this year. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye says, therefore, Hilchach ki chazi inish, the mitzlach zara afla. Therefore, what's very interesting. Abaye gives a practical piece of advice. Abaye says, if you see that your grain is doing great, right? Baruch Hashem Mishal Abizocha. Your grain is doing great. What should you do? You should go ahead. Literally what it means is if you see that your slow maturing grain that you planted earlier in the season is doing great, plant more grain now. Because I will say that means there's been a good din, a good judgment upon you for grain. So if the slow maturing grain has been planted and is doing well, plant some more fast maturing grain so you can chaparayim, right? You could go ahead and cash in a little bit more on the favorable din. Likdam velizra charfa ad demati lemedayna kadam salak. Ultimately, again, if you see that the slow maturing grain is maturing nicely, quickly chaparayim and plant some more slower maturing grain. I said it wrong. If you see that your slow maturing grain that you planted earlier in the season is doing well, that's indicative of a favorable din, and therefore go ahead and plant some additional fast maturing grain so you can chaparayim on the positive din of that year. Which I will say is such an incredible metaphor for life. If things are going well for you, you see, people sometimes think that when things are going well in life, it's a great time to slow down and, enjoy. And it's just the opposite. If things are going well for you in life, if your parnasa is intact, if your health is intact, if your mishpacha is intact, that is the time to literally hit the gas, right? That is the time to try to accomplish more and more and more. It's not the time to slow down because it's so rare in life that all of the different aspects of existence are in alignment. And if you have that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you those brachas. If the wheat is maturing nicely, plant more, do more, accomplish more. Don't slow down. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Mani mas nisin." We'll say, whose opinion does our Mishnah reflect? Lo Rabbi Meir, lo Rabbi Huda, lo Rabbi Yosef, lo Rabbi Nasser. And I say, here we go. So now we're going to see. So it's interesting. The Gemara says, who does the Mishnah not reflect? Who does the Mishnah reflect? Well, I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Rabbi Meir, it's not Rabbi Huda, it's not Rabbi Yossi, it's not Rabbi Nasser. There's pretty much no one left, right? Who does the Mishnah reflect? Not any of these opinions. This Sanya, because the Gemara quotes a beautiful, beautiful brayso. I will say, by the way, I'll also point out it's interesting when you see a Gemara like this, it's always intriguing because this is stylistically how the Gemara works. Whenever the Gemara wants to say whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect, the Gemara will often begin by saying who it's not, which is an interesting yesod in life as well, because sometimes when we want to try to figure out who we are, or what we are, sometimes the process begins by identifying what you're not. But all too often in life, we stop there. We define ourselves by what we're not. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, which is okay, as long as it's followed up by, I am this, I am this, I am this. In other words, identifying what I'm not is helpful as long as it ultimately yields a reality and an understanding of what and who I truly am. So the Gemara goes right to both say, incredible sugya. Here we go, this Anya. Hakomi donim b'Rosh Hashana. So remember again, let's keep in mind, from the Mishnah's perspective, all we have right now is a statement about Rosh Hashanah. And all the Gemara said, and all the Mishnah said was, on Rosh Hashanah, humanity is judged. That's what we have. So watch this Vraisa. Opinion number one, this is Rabbi Meir. Everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah. And their judgment is sealed. Gzardin is sealed on Yom Kippur. That's Rabbi Meir, right? So Rabbi Meir has a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur model. Judgment on Rosh Hashanah, we'll call it judgment sealed on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hakol midon b'Rosh Hashanah. Everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah. Ugzar din shalahem nechtam kol echad ve'echad bizmano. Rabbi Yehuda has an interesting model. He says everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah. When is judgment sealed? Well, for each and everything in the world, it's sealed at a different time. For example, the Pesach ala Tvua, so the judgment for Pesach is sealed. The judgment, for grain is sealed on Pesach. Ba'atzeres al Peros Ha'ilan, fruit is Shavuos. B'chag nidon alamayim, water, rainfall is Sukkis. Va'adam nidon b'Rosh Hashanah, ugzardin shelo nechtam b'Yom Kippurim. and man is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and his Gzar Din, his judgment is sealed as on Yom Kippur. So we'll say, so again, what's interesting in Rabbi Huda's model is Rabbi Huda understands that Rosh Hashanah is the universal day of judgment. Everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah. It's just that the judgment is sealed at different intervals throughout the year. But the initial judgment for everything, man and all of nature, occurs on Rosh Hashanah. That's Rabbi Huda. Next, Rabbi Yossi Omer, we'll say, get ready for this. Rabbi Yossi says, Adam nidon b'chol yom. Rabbi Yossi says, man is judged every single day. Every single day. There is no one day of judgment, says Rabbi Yossi. Man is judged every single day. Shneimar vasif kidenu labkarim. Quoting over here the pasuk from Eov, vasif kidenu. We'll see what it means. We'll darshan the pasuk. Vasif kidenu, he is remembered or he is judged. Levikarim. We'll see how to darshan that. Rabbi Nassan says, Adam nidon b'chol sha'ah. Rabbi Nassan says man is judged each and every day. Man is judged each and every day. Each and every moment, Each and every shah. So we'll say, shah means hour, but more appropriately, shah means every moment. Man is judged every moment. Amar, la regoim tivchanenu. So we'll say the pasuk again in Eov, it's the same pasuk. Vasif kidenu lavikarim, ula regoim tivchanenu is Eov zayin yud ches. So one is just actually in the first part of the pasuk, second opinion is actually in the second part of the pasuk. So we'll say, we'll analyze each of these particular opinions. But these are the four opinions that the Mishnah does not reflect. So the Gemara says, v'chisema, v'olam Rabbi Huda. Well, maybe it is Rabbi Huda, right? Because remember again, we'll say, what was the opinion of Rabbi Huda? Rabbi Huda said everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and respective din is sealed at different intervals. So maybe it is Rabbi Huda. In other words, we'll say, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says the world is judged at 4 different times. But maybe our Mishnah really is like Rabbi Huda. V'chi katani masnisen agzar din. We'll say, maybe what the Mishnah meant when it said that the world is judged at 4 times, what the Mishnah meant was what? Judgment is sealed at 4 different times. In other words, maybe the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Huda, namely, universal judgment occurs on Rosh Hashanah. Everything is judged. But that particular judgment is sealed at different times throughout the year for different things. Ihachi, kashya adam. But if that's the case, what do you do about man? Because remember again, see the Mishnah both say makes no mention of what? The Mishnah makes no mention of Yom Kippur. Right? All the Mishnah says is that man is judged on Rosh Hashanah. And the way it makes it sound is that man is judged and judgment is sealed on Rosh Hashanah. There is no mention at all of Yom Kippur. So to which the Gemara says, Amarava, Haitana debe Rabbi Yishmael. You're right. Our Mishnah reflects the view of the Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael. Here we go. The Gemara says, the Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael. Ba'aba prakim olam nidon. The world is judged at 4 different times. The Pesach ala tvua, on Pesach for grain, Batzeres al peros ha'ilan, on Shavuos for fruit of the tree, B'chag nidonin ala mayim, on Sukkot we are judged for rainfall, Va'adam nidon b'Rosh Hashanah, man is judged on Rosh Hashanah, Ugzar din shelo nechtam b'Yom Kippurim, and his judgment is sealed on Yom Kippur. The Gemara says, V'chi katani masnisin atchilas din. And when the Mishnah makes reference to Rosh Hashanah and says that man is judged on Rosh Hashanah, what is that referring to? The initial judgment. In other words, I will say, so what the Mishnah is referring to when it says Adam Nido Rosh Hashanah is man's initial judgment is on Rosh Hashanah, but his Gzar Din, the sealing of his judgment, occurs when? On Yom Kippur. So we'll say, so therefore again, we've established now, our Mishnah reflects the view of Tana Debi Rabbi Yishmael, that everything, now we'll say, so remember, what I want to point out over here is as follows. The Gemara is assuming right now that the opinion reflected in the Mishnah is as follows. On Pesach, grain is judged and verdict is sealed. Right? Shavuos, fruit is judged, verdict is sealed. Sukkot, rainfall judged, verdict sealed. And then Rosh Hashanah is the one exception. Rosh Hashanah judgment is made, but verdict is not sealed until Yom Kippur. So when it's referring to man in the Mishnah, it's referring to Tchilas Din, the initial part of judgment. Good. So we'll say now, we have all of these other opinions about the nature of judgment, which actually is quite profound. And nafkaminas will say again, how do you understand when you're being judged in this world by HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not just a matter of semantics. It's incredibly important because it fundamentally impacts how we're going to live our lives. So here we go. Let's analyze these opinions. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda, my time to Rabbi Yossi. We'll say, what is Rabbi Yossi's logic? Remember again, what did Rabbi Yossi hold? Rabbi Yossi held that halacha lamaisa adam nidon bechol yom. A person is judged every single day. Every single day there's a judgment. So what's Rabbi Yossi's logic? The Gemara says, we said, Kidika Amar Taimei Besifkedenu Lavikarim. Because we'll say the Pasuk says in Eov, HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us for judgment. Lavikarim. Lavikarim bepashtos is what? Means what? Boker. Every morning, every day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds us, it remembers us for judgment. He judges us every day. So the Gemara says, first wide line, first the intermediate wide lines, we'll say, Anan, Hachi Kaminan. No. What we need to say is as follows. My taima lo amar ki Rabbi Nassan. What we're interested about is as follows. Why doesn't Rabbi Yossi hold like Rabbi Nassan? Remember again, what do these two opinions say? Rabbi Yossi holds that judgment occurs every single day. Rabbi Nassan holds that judgment occurs when? Every moment. Every moment. Now I will say, remember, they're both quoting the same pasuk, right? It's just Rabbi Yossi is quoting the first part of the pasuk. Vasifkedenu labikarim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us for judgment every morning, and ultimately again, and Rabbi Nassan is quoting the end of the pasuk. Larigaim sivchanenu. And every moment he is literally again judging us or watching us. So the Gemara is asking, they're both dashing the same pasuk. So Rabbi Nassan, why do you choose to dash in the first part of the pasuk and not the second part of the pasuk? So the Gemara says, Anan hachi kaminan, my time Allah mak Rabbi Nassan. Why does Rabbi Yossi not hold of Rabbi Nassan? To which the Gemara says, because bechina iyune ba'almahi. Because remember again, Rabbi Nassan darshans the second part of the pasuk. La regaim sivchanenu. So Rabbi Yossi will say, the lashon of sivchanenu is iyune ba'alma. Doesn't mean judgment. It just means watching. So what the pasuk is conveying to us is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu watches us at every moment. But sivchanenu is not a lashon of din, not a lashon of judgment. So the Gemara says, 1 second, but Rabbi Yossi, Pekida nami iyune ba'almehi. I could ask the same thing about your phrase, because remember again, Rabbi Yossi darshans the first part of the pasuk, vasifkedenu lebikarim. So we'll say, lashon of vasifkedenu means what? Pakad. Vashem pakad asara. It just means to remember. It doesn't necessarily mean judgment either. Pekida nami iyune ba'almehi. Pekida also doesn't have to mean judgment, right? Pekida could also mean just a simple iyune, looking into something. Amrav Chisda, you're right. Taime de Rabbi Yossi mehacha. In reality, Rabbi Yossi's position, namely that din occurs every single day, that we are judged every single day, comes from a different pasuk. The quotes the pasuk, Lasos mishpat avdo mishpat amo Yisrael tevar yom biyomo. We'll say quotes over the pasuk from Melachim, that ultimately again the pasuk says to go ahead and perform the mishpat of his servant and the mishpat of his nation Yisrael tevar yom biyomo, each and every day. Which I will say Rabbi Yossi darshans to mean what? Mishpat, judgment, occurs each and every day. That's the lesson over here. Mishpat, judgment, occurs each and every day. V'amrav Chisda. So the Gemara just goes on a tangent here for just a moment. We've had this before. V'amrav Chisda, Melech v'tzibor, Melech nichnas tchila. There's another important impact of this particular pasuk. It teaches me that if both the king and the tzibor await judgment, what's the halacha? Melech nichnas tchila ladin. The king goes in for judgment first. Shene'amar, Lasos mishpat avdo mishpat amo Yisrael. Because the pasuk says first HaKadosh Baruch Hu does the mishpat of his servant, which is a reference to the king, and then a mishpat of the nation. My time, why does the king go in for judgment before the nation? So on a basic level, it's not appropriate for the king to wait in the waiting room. Right? It's not appropriate for the king to wait while the nation is being judged. The other possibility is that halacha l'maisa, we want the king to be judged before the anger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu flares up as a result of the iniquity of the nation. So therefore, again, I just want to point out something very important over here. So what we've just established is that Rabbi Yossi's idea that literally, again, Adam nidon b'chol yom, that a person is judged each and every day, is not really from the pasuk in Eov, but rather it's from the pasuk in Malachim, Lasos mishpat avdo u'mishpat amo Yisrael dvar yom Biyomo. Mishpat occurs each and every day, which Rabbi is an incredibly profound idea. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Get ready. Rav Yosef. Get ready for this. Rav Yosef says, Kiman matzla ha'idno akitsiri va'amiri. So we'll say, this is absolutely incredible. So Rav Yosef says, let me ask you, why do we daven today, or according to whose opinion do we daven regarding weakness and illness each and every day? Now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. HaKatsiri umeri, Rashi says, Mefarshim Sechas Nedarim, Katsiri cholim, Meri'i tamidi chachamim shein teshushe koach. So again, Rosa, listen to what Rav Yosef is saying over here. Rav Yosef is asking, we daven every day for refuah sheleimah, right? We daven for a whole bunch of things. Now, we'll say, so if we're davening every day for refuah, we're davening every day for parnasa, for illness, for weakness, for all things we daven for, in accordance with whose theological model of judgment is prayer for things each and every day appropriate? So the Gemara says, listen to this, Kiman, Rabbi Yossi. It's like Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi holds that there is a new judgment each and every day. So therefore I daven each and every day for a favorable judgment. So I just want to point out, what the Gemara's shaila is predicated on is the following. If you hold that Adam nidon b'Rosh Hashana, that a person is judged Rosh Hashana, and my judgment is sealed on Yom Kippur, then I will say that poses an incredible theological question, which is, what's the point of prayer? Then what's the point of prayer? So why am I davening for people to have a refuah sheleimah? HaKodesh Baruch Hu decided already someone's going to live or someone's going to die. And what's the point of davening for parnasa? HaKodesh Baruch Hu already determined how much I'm going to have. Or what's the point of davening for children? HaKodesh Baruch Hu determined I'm going to have them, I'm not going to have them. So we'll say it's a profound theological question about the interface between prayer and divine judgment. So the Gemara is asking, Rabbi Yosef is asking a very simple question. We daven for refuah. So according to whose model are we davening for refuah? So the Gemara says on the most basic level, Rabbi Yossi. Because Rabbi Yossi holds there is no one day of judgment. Every day is a day of judgment. V'bay Sema, the other possibility I will say is as follows. V'bay Sema, Kirabanan, Ukid Rabbi Yitzchok. Dam Rabbi Yitzchok, Yafet Sa'akali Adam, Bein Kodem Gizardin, Bein La'achar Gizardin. We'll say this is incredible. It can even be according to Rabbi Yitzchok. How so? Because Rabbi Yitzchok holds that halacha l'maisa, tza'aka, tefillah, is always powerful and impactful, both before the verdict and after the verdict. So Rabbi said this is incredible, because what the Gemara introduces us to is as follows. Even if you hold that halacha l'maisa, there is a din, and there is a sealed judgment on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, that does not mean that it's unchangeable. That does not mean that it's unchangeable. That tefillah has the ability, tefillah has the power to go ahead and even change a sealed divine verdict, which is a fascinating theological idea. I'm going to draw your attention now to Tosas for just a moment. You see Tosas, Kibman Maslina Idnak Tziri V'Amerik Rabbi Yossi. We'll see, we do not have time for this, but we're going to do it anyway. Because sometimes something's important enough, you have to make the time. So it says Tosas. So again, we'll say, this is such an incredibly, we'll say everybody struggles with this idea. I just want to point out, this question, the Rambam deals with it in Hilchos Tshuva, right? The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, he says, how is Tshuva possible? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that I'm going to do anyway, so how is Tshuva possible? And you know what the Ravid says? Essentially he's asking, do I really have free will? This is the famous kasha of the, and the Ravid says essentially, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Some certain things, again, it's very interesting to ponder theologically. Practically, you do your job, do what you have to do, and at the end of the day, daven, do tshuva. But nevertheless, the shaila is a fascinating shaila. The Gemara is asking it. So why are we davening for a fool? Why are we davening for anything if the verdict's been sealed? So look at Tosas. Well, it's incredible. Vim Tomar. The Gemara says, but this is a much more global shayla. But remember, again, this is quite fascinating. So you kind of know how the story ends, right? You know which model do we adopt? We adopt that man is judged on Rosh Hashana. Man is judged on Rosh Hashana, and when is judgment sealed? Yom Kippur. Okay, not really Yom Kippur, maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah, or Shmini Atzeres. If you're a good chassid, you can get until Chanukah. If you're a really good chassid, Tu B'Shvat, push a little bit more Purim. Then again, there are opinions that say Pesach, and once you have Pesach, it's pretty much ready up until Elul. Right? But bottom line, we adopt the model that says judgment on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah Yikasevun, Ubiyom Tzom Kippur Yechasemun. But yet, Anshe Knesset Gedolah, right? Chazal wrote Shmona Esrei. And Shmona Esrei is filled with what? Requests. Shmona Esrei in its essence is a petitional prayer. So as Tosfos, if we believe that judgment is sealed in Yom Kippur, why did Anshe Knesset Gedolah put all of these requests in Shmona Esrei? Va'od, Rabbi Huda Damar Hacha, Adam Nidam Rosh Hashanah, Ugzar Din Shal Nechtam Yom Kippurim, Har Parakam D'Shabbos, HaNichnas Levaker Chol, Omer HaMokov Yirachim Alecha, Va'acholi Amo Yisrael. Furthermore, even Rabbi Huda, who says explicitly over here that judgment is sealed in Yom Kippur, he says in Shabbos that when you go to visit the sick, you should daven for the person. You should say, Hamakom Yirachim Alecha. Hashem should have compassion on you and upon Kol Chole Yisrael. So obviously, even Rabbi Huda, who holds that din is sealed on Yom Kippur, is saying you should daven for someone to have a refuah. Vom Rabbeinu Tam, we'll say, here we go. This is incredible. Vom Rabbeinu Tam, the Shelo Yachle Vaday Lo Matzalinon. So we'll say, this is incredible. Rabbeinu Tam says, we don't daven not to get sick. We don't daven not to get sick. Why don't you daven not to get sick? Both say, this is incredible. According to Rabbeinu Tam, because whether or not you're going to get sick, that's been decided. That's been decided. So whether or not I'm going to get sick, that's been decided. El Rabbi Yossi. Aval. So again, Rabbi Yossi, now remember, in Rabbi Yossi's model, that man is judged each and every day. Every day is a new judgment. You could daven not to get sick. But according to all the other models, or many of the other models, where my din is decided on Rosh Hashanah, whether I'm going to get sick or not get sick, that's already been decided. Aval sheyisrape matzlinon. What do we daven for? We daven for refuah. See, because even if the gzar din is that I'm going to get sick, when I'm going to get healed, how I'm going to get healed, that's the variable in life. Aliba de koli alma. The masay yachlu, listen to this. The masay yachlu nigzar. When and how I'm going to get sick, that's already been decreed. Masay yisrapu. When I'm going to be healed, lo nigzar. That has not been decreed. Va'amar b'reish hanodem min hamavushal ahach the Rabbi Yossi katsiri mamish Meir Rabbana v'hashna atzalina akatsiri sheisrapu v'amri hainu Rabbana shlo yachlu mashu v'sam berchas hashanim hainu t'kama perkin shem pasku gishem mu'atim shadin hamakom mizmanon. So we'll say, so again, this is incredible. So what Rabbeinu Tam essentially says is as follows, that, and it's actually fascinating. I never thought about this before. Right? If you think about it, what do we say in Shemona Esrei? We say, Rifa'enu Hashem v'nei rafei. We ask Hashem to heal us. What don't we ask for? What don't we ask for? Right? We don't ask not to get sick. Which I've also said, by the way, I just have to say, I just want to tell you something amazing. Think about what's happened over the pandemic. The global panic that's been created. Why? Think about this in just a moment. Why? Because everything's been about what? The avoidance of getting sick. The avoidance of getting sick. The avoidance of getting sick creates global panic. We've lived through this. Rabbeinu Tam says, this is incredible. Whether you're going to get sick or not going to get sick, that's from the Ribono Shel. This is not like a like an anti-COVID protective measures. I want to be clear. Right? I'm just saying it's an incredible thing. We don't daven in Shemona Esrei not to get sick. We don't daven not to get sick, because whether you are going to get sick or not going to get sick, says Rabbi Tam, that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's a gzar din with that. There are certain things that are pre-programmed already at the beginning of the year. What I daven for is rifa'enu. So we'll say now I just want to point out, there are those who argue on this theological construct, which we will get to. Obviously, Rabbi Yossi argues on this construct. Because according to Rabbi Yossi, there's a new din each and every day. There's a new din each and every day. So therefore, every day I can daven. I got sick yesterday. I don't want to get sick today. But according to the model of the Rabbanan and pretty much everyone else, well, except for Rabbi Nassan, that there's a din on Rosh Hashanah, a gzar din on Yom Kippur. Sickness it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. What I daven for is refuah. Which Shabbos say in life there are certain things that are unavoidable, certain things that are going to occur. What I have the control over through my tefillos and my tovim is the duration and nature of impact. That's what I have control over. Which, I'm sorry?
What about your shtadlus?
No, of course you put in your, of course.
Okay.
You put in the shtadlus also, correct. Correct. But again, whether or not you're going to get better or not, that's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You always have to, putting in your shtadlus always goes with that. But I'm just pointing out something amazing. A global hysteria has been created because I think we operate a little bit under the false pretense that you could control everything with hishtadlus. And that's false. That's false. You cannot control. If there's one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is you could put in all of the hishtadlus you want. But if something is supposed to happen, it is going to happen. You could quadruple mask. And there are people who do that too. And at the end of the day, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something to occur, a little organism to affect you, it's going to affect you. Does it mean you don't put in the shtadlus? Of course not. You have to. Greg's 100% right. You put in the shtadlus in everything. But there is a hashkafas Chaim that there are certain things that are going to occur. Certain things, no matter what precautions you take, there are certain things that are going to occur. That is the greatest Musar Haskell of this pandemic. So what I daven for, says the Rabbeinu Tam, is not to get sick, because that's determined. What I daven for is the duration and the nature of that illness. Now, if you look at the end of Tosis says something amazing. Va'od Yishlomar, he says, look at the end of Tosis, the Tefillah derabim shiny. Wow. There is one exception to this. So, Tefillah of the Rabbim. So congregational prayer, right? Tefillah is a better word for Tefillah the Rabbim. Not congregational prayer. What is it? Communal prayer. Thank you. Communal Tefillah. Communal prayer. Listen to this. This is incredible. Digzar dinam nikra kidel kamon. So listen to this. Individual prayer, says Rabbeinu Tam, cannot overturn the gzar din. In other words, so individual prayer, Chash Baruch Hu determined that I'm going to get sick. My individual tefillah cannot overturn that. Communal prayer can. Tefillah derabim absolutely has the ability to do so. So which is just absolutely incredible. I'll say, sometimes, we don't understand the gift we have in tefillah b'tzibur. Just, again, davening in the morning, in the weekday morning, it has to move fast. That's just the klala of Adam Arishon. You're only going to eat by the sweat of your brow. So we don't have the time or the luxury during the week to daven as we should. It's got to be fast, it's got to be efficient, and it's got to move, right? If you get to say every single word in Shacharis, that means that the shul's doing something wrong, right? That's wrong. It's not supposed to happen that way, right? So I'll say it's supposed to be fast, furious, mamish, like no one's business, right? You're supposed to say, I think I saw a blur of Psuki de Zimra go by there. That's a good davening, right? I just want to point out, the truth is, all kidding aside, just being here and davening with a tzibur, just being with a tzibur and davening with a tzibur is so powerful. It's so incredibly powerful. And I say this especially to the Chaver, because I always like, it's always a remarkable thing, because there's a bunch of guys here who, because of work, right, daven, don't even get to stay till the end of davening, are in and out, and you should never for a moment think that that's not impactful, and that's not powerful, and that's not important. Even if a person finishes the daf and you've got 12 minutes because he carpools or whatever else, that's meaningful and impactful. That's tefillah b'tzibur. The ability to daven in a beis medrash with other Jews is so incredible. It's a gift. It's a gift, and it's the kind of gift that can literally change a universe. So Rabbeinu Tam says, you're right, if I'm on my own, there's only so much I can do. But if I'm with the tzibur, I could overturn anything and everything. Incredible. I'll say, okay, so like I said, good. We had plenty of time for that Tosis. That's perfect. Let's go weiter. So I'll say, all right, so let's go. So I just want to point out, there's so much more in that Tosis, but here you see the theological construct of Rabbeinu Tam. There are certain immutable parts of judgment, says Rabbeinu Tam, which I can't control. What I can control is how they play out, the duration and the intensity. Or alternatively, I can't alter it if I'm on my own. But with tefillah b'tzibur, anything can be changed. Back to the Gemara. Let's go back to this. So the Gemara says, Tanya, Am Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Akiva, Mipnei Ma Amra Torah Heviu Omer B'Pesach. So we're expanding now a little bit on these for Rosh Hashana. So Rabbi Yehuda said, name Rabbi Akiva, Mipnei Ma Amra Torah Heviu Omer B'Pesach. Why does the Torah say bring the carbon omer on Pesach? Mipnei Sha Pesach Zman Tevuahu. Because Pesach is the beginning, right? Is the time of grain. We'll say, remember again. Now the only grain that's mature Pesach time is barley, right? Wheat matures a little bit later in the season, more by Shavuos. But the first grain barley is already mature by Pesach. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Heviu lefanai omer bePesach kedei shetisparech lachem tevuah shebesados." HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Bring me an offering of grain. Bring me an offering of barley in order that your grain will be blessed in the fields." Which both say such an incredible yisod. What does that mean? Both say if you want bracha in your gashmios, make sure to use it for ruchnios. Right? That is the secret to material success. You want blessing in your material wealth, use your material wealth for a higher purpose. If somehow you use your gashmios as a way to bring you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so you live a comfortable life, and living a comfortable life allows you to learn more, allows you to daven more. See, both say people make the mistake. The moment that your gashmios takes away from your ruchnios, so the moment that your work comes at the expense of your neshama, is the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, why should I give you that bracha? Why should I give you a bracha if that bracha comes at the expense of your ruchnios? It doesn't make any sense. If a person is blessed with gashmios, that bracha comes about if it facilitates, enhances, and enables ruchnios. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you want grain? Fantastic. Bring it as a carbon. Bring it as a carbon. Bring the first grain as a carbon, and ultimately in order that the grain of your field shall be blessed. Next, why does the Torah say bring the shtei alechem? Which Rabbi say was a carbon of grain of wheat. Shtei alechem, the 2 loaves on Shavuos. So the Gemara says, first of the widest lines, in order that the fruits of the tree should be blessed. Now, both say, now what do the fruits of the tree have to do with the shtei alechem? So Rashi points out over here, shtei alechem yeratza peiros ha'ilon shein matirin lahavi bikurin. Oh, it's supposed to be very interesting. You can't bring bikurim, first fruit, until you bring the carbon of the shtei alechem. So even though the shtei alechem ultimately again is not fruit, it's wheat, but it's the bringing of the shtei alechem that allows for the bringing of bikurim, the first fruit, and therefore in the schus of bringing the shtei alechem, the fruits are blessed. Now Rashi quotes something amazing. I will say this daf is like we found gold, like treasure. So Rashi says, "Vani shamati Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei de'azla kiman damar b'Sanhedrin eitz sha'achal adam harishon chita haisa." People say this is pretty beautiful. So Rashi says the other possibility is Rabbi Yehuda espouses the opinion of Sanhedrin that the tree that Adam Harishon, the forbidden fruit that Adam Harishon ate, was actually not a fruit at all, but rather it was wheat. It was wheat. And therefore again, Rabbi Yehuda says, we bring shtei halechem, wheat, on Shavuos, so that the fruits of the field should be blessed. Quite beautiful. Why does the Torah say that there's nisa chamayim, the water libation on Sukkos? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, pour water on the Mizbeach before me on Sukkos, in order that ultimately, again, you should have bountiful rainfall. So we'll say, you see the same theme over and over. Use the Gashmios for the facilitation of Ruchnios, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll bless your Gashmios. If there is a divide between your material life and your spiritual life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, there's no point in me giving you the Gashmios. But if the Gashmios facilitates and enables the Ruchnios, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll bless it all. V'amar lefanai Rosh Hashanah, I'll say this and how beautiful this is. V'amar lefanai Rosh Hashanah, Malchios, Zichronos, V'shofros. And I will say, ultimately again, say before HaKadosh Baruch Hu says on Rosh Hashanah, say before me Malchios, which speaks about God's monarchical identity. Zichronos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers everything. V'shofros, and all the different sections of the shofar of the past and the shofar of the future Mashiach. Malchios, Kadesha Tamlichuni Aleichem, say Malchios in order to coronate me on you. Zichronos, remembrance, Kadesha Yala Zichronechem Lefanei Letova. So say Zichronos in order that I should remember you favorably. Ubama, and with what? So we'll say, Bama means, and with what should you coronate me? And with what are you remembered before me positively? B'shofar. We'll say, how do we affect Malchios and Zichronos on Rosh Hashanah? Malchios and Zichronos is affected ultimately again through the mechanism of the shofar. Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Avo says as follows. Rabbi Avo, Lama token b'shofar shel ayil. Why do we go ahead? We'll say, I just want to say, we'll have to come back to it, but I just want to point out that this is so, because there are certain things you see in the Gemara that they're such fundamental building blocks for life. One of them is V'Rabbeinu Tam and how tefillah works with judgment. The other is this Gashmius Ruchnius thing. I want to say it is so incredibly important that we realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us our brachos in life to facilitate our Ruchnius. Right? If I have Gashmius, but as a result of my Gashmius, I'm so busy with my Gashmius that I have to cut corners in my Ruchnius, that's a bad recipe for life success. A success like that doesn't endure. So if my, and this happens, it's easy to be pulled into this, that my work, everything is I have so much responsibility, I have to cut this corner, I have to cut that corner, I can't do this, I can't be great. We'll say, it's not an avera, it's not a recipe for success. The moment that my gashmius comes at the expense of even the smallest piece of ruchnius, think about this for just a moment. Why should HaKadosh Baruch Hu give me the bracha of gashmius if my gashmius is taking away from my ruchnius? It doesn't make sense. It's just a bad divine decision. It's just a bad allocation of resources. So we have to be so careful that the more materially we have, that enables us to produce more spiritually and not the opposite. That's the secret of material success. That your gashmios doesn't take away from your ruchnius. Fakir, just the opposite. It enables even more ruchnius. We'll have to come back to that at some point because we're good. Let's go back there. Rabbi Yoel says as follows: Lama tokim b'shofar shel ayil. Why do we use a ram's horn on Rosh Hashanah? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu tiku lefana b'shofar shel ayil. Blow the ram's horn before me on Rosh Hashanah. Kedei she'eskar lachem akedas Yitzchok ben Avram. The ram's horn is there in order to go ahead and remember the Akedah. Both say, listen to this. Uma'ala ani aleichem, and when you sound the shofar, ki'ilu akaratem es atzmechem lefonai. I count it as if you have sacrificed yourself before me. Both say, I want to say something. There's so much to say on this as well. One very quick idea. The Rebbe Rabbunim Pshischa says something amazing. He says, why do we use a shofar? Right? Remember again, the shofar is reminiscent of the ayil, of the ram. Right? Avram doesn't sacrifice Yitzchok. I don't want to ruin the story for anyone, right? Avram doesn't sacrifice Yitzchok. He sacrifices the ayil. So the Rebbe, Rabbi Pshischa says, wouldn't it be so better, instead of taking the ram of an ayil, we should take a knife. Take a knife, right? Why isn't that? Well, let's should take a knife, l'zecher the Akedah. Why taking the horn around l'zecher Akedah? So the Rebbe says something incredible. He says, because the entire message of the Akedah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to die al Kiddush Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live al Kiddush Hashem. Rabbi Soloveitchik says such an amazing thing, and he says, it's easy to die al Kiddush Hashem. Why? The Rav says, you only have to do it once. You just have to summon up the courage to do it once. But to live al Kiddush Hashem, as we know, is a daily struggle. Every day it is a struggle to live al Kiddush Hashem. So therefore, again, something amazing. So the Rebbe Pshischa says, we could take the horn of the ram, because the horn of the ram symbolizes the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't want Yitzchok's death. He wanted Yitzchok alive, because as spiritual and as holy as Yitzchok's death al Kiddush Hashem would have been, his life al Kiddush Hashem is even more impactful. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. So on Rosh Hashanah, we take the horn of the ayil to remind ourselves that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live lives al Kiddush Hashem. That every single day, I have to make sure that I am doing something to sanctify the Ribono Shel Olam be'enei habrios be'enei ha'olam, in the eyes of the world. That's the job of the Jew. That's the mission of a Yid. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rabbi Yitzchok, Lama tokim b'Rosh Hashanah. Why do we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? So we'll say, this is great. Why do we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Rachmana Amar Tiku. Because Torah says blow the shofar. We'll say, can I just tell you something? If you had one line of all of Shas, one line, this would be it. Why do you blow the shofar? State in the Torah. Kadosh Baruch Hu says blow the shofar. What you think he's so smart? You think, we're so intellectual? Wait, what are you talking about over here? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, do something, I do it. He'll say, this is what it means to be a Jew. Yes, of course, after I accept this premise, we delve into it. But all of Yiddishkeit is in this one sentence. Do you know what it means to be a Jew? It means to be a good soldier. And what does it mean to be a good soldier? Follow orders. Follow orders. Lama tokim Rosh Hashana Rachmana Amar Tiku. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, blow the shofar. Elalama Marian. Rather, the Gemara says, why do we blow truas? So the Gemara says, Meir Nachmana Amar Zichron Trua. Because Torah calls the shofar blast a trua. That's why. The Gemara says, no. Elalama tokim Marian Kishen Yoshvin. V'tokin. We got some days. V'tokin Marian Kishen Omdin. Rather, says the Gemara, what the Gemara's question really is not why I blow the shofar, and not why I blow tekiyas and truas and tekiyas, but rather, why do we blow the shofar? Lama tokin marian kishen yoshim, when we're sitting, and kishen omdin. Shabbos said the Gemara here is making reference to the tekiyos dimiyushav and the tekiyos dimu'umad. Now, for our purposes, what this refers to are the sets of blasts before Musaf and during Musaf. Why do we blow two sets of blasts? The Gemara says, why don't you just blow whatever you're gonna do, right? Tekiyas, teruas, 30, 109, whatever you're gonna do. Why don't you just do it in one unit? Why do we do some over here, some over here? To which the Gemara says, "Kedei la'arvev has-satan," in order to confuse the satan. Now I will say, what does this mean? So in general, so we often have. This answer always sounds strange to us, to confuse the Satan. The Satan, right, is the prosecuting angel, the one who always wants to deliver bad news, wants to prosecute against Klal Yisrael. So what does this mean? We're confusing him. Right, so we'll say there are different approaches. We're confusing him because, again, he thinks maybe it's the shofar of Mashiach, and therefore he can't prosecute against us. He doesn't realize when he thinks we're stopping, we're starting, we're this, we're that. First of all, the Satan's got to be a semi-intelligent being, if he's a being at all, right? Because remember, again, whenever we speak about the Satan, we've spoken about this many times. Satan doesn't refer necessarily to something external. It refers to something internal, the self-sabotaging mechanisms. But even if it's something external, even if there is really an angel who prosecutes against us, it's got to be a semi-intelligent being. So by now, probably again, 5,782 years into the creation of the world, it's probably caught on, right? He's probably gotten his hands on a machzor, right? So chances are he knows what we're doing. So we'll say, look at Rashi. Rashi says something so profound. Kedei la'arvev shelo yastin kisheyishma Yisrael mechabevin es hamitzvos misasis min dvorov. We'll say Rashi says you're right. It doesn't mean you confuse him that he doesn't know what's going on. It means you confuse him in that he's unable to articulate his negative arguments against Klal Yisrael. Why? Because when the Satan sees all of the good of Am Yisrael, when he sees all of our spiritual beauty, when he sees how much we love mitzvos and everything we're doing, his arguments become confused. When he sees that Klal Yisrael is sitting and blowing the shofar and doing tshuva and davening and crying and supplicating, he just simply can't speak the negative words that he had prepared. So beautiful. We'll say that's how you confuse the Satan. I bombard him with positivity. It's not the pshat. It's Mashiach, Mashiach. I bombard him with positivity. And when I bombard him with positivity, the whole prosecutorial speech, right, that he had against me, he can't even get the words out because he's so overwhelmed by the good that I am putting forward. It's so beautiful. Rabbi Yitzchok, Kol Shana She'in Tokin La B'Tchila, Samariya La B'Sofa. Any year in which we don't blow the shofar in the beginning, ultimately we cry in the end. In other words, that if for some reason, that Tosfos points out over here, this is not talking about Shabbos, right? Because if we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos, that's because of halacha. What it means, says Tosfos, is if you don't blow the shofar because of some other circumstance, failure to blow the shofar in the beginning of the year causes crying by the end of the year, which means that if I don't start, shofar is such an impactful mitzvah that I need it in order to be successful in the coming year. And if I don't blow it at the beginning of the year, then unfortunately, again, that paves me for misfortune for the rest of the year. So the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? The law, Irbav Satan. Rabbi Yitzchok, Kol Shana Shirasha B'Tchilasa, Misasharis B'Sofa. Rabbi Yitzchok says, and I will say again, I'm sorry, I read that quickly, but what's the reason why there's crying by the end of the year? Because I didn't overwhelm the Satan with positivity. And if you don't overwhelm the Satan with positivity, then what? Then what? He's able to prosecute, which I will say, by the way, is a great approach, not just for the Satan, but for difficult people as well. Sometimes the way to deal with difficult people is not to meet them where they are, or not to respond with nastiness, but it's just to overwhelm them with kindness. Right? Sometimes, again, if you just don't get in the mud, right, and you just don't sling it back, and at the end of the day you say, you know what, you're going to do whatever you're going to do, that's not how I behave, that's not how I interact. I'll meet your lashon hara with kindness, and I'll meet your negativity with a smile, and I'll go ahead and meet all of your nastiness just b'sever panim yafos. It's amazing that sometimes sometimes you confuse the Satan. And sometimes the Satan doesn't know what to do with all of that kindness and positivity, and it shuts down the machlokes. Not just for the celestial Satan, for a lot of human Satans as well. So I don't mean to call people Satans, but you understand the metaphor. Good. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Kol Shana, there are some people who are Satan. Kol Shana sherasha b'tchilasa misashos b'sofa. Let's say any year which you begin in an impoverished state, ultimately, again, ends off in a wealthy state, which means, Rabbi say what? Any year in which we humble ourselves before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we do tshuva, and we apologize, and we cry, so sharasha, like an ani, at the end of the year, ultimately, again, there's wealth. Not necessarily material wealth, but spiritual wealth. Shene'emar mereishes hashana, the pasuk says mereishes. Mereishes ksiv. Reishes is written without an aleph. And therefore, again, Rosh means a pauper. Va'ad achris sofa sheyesh la achris. So we'll say, if I begin the year like a Rosh, I begin the year like a pauper. So we'll say, the idea for successful din is you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu with humility. It's all about humility. If I come in with humility and a leiv nishbar, broken heart, confident about the great things that I've done, but also really honest about the things in which I've fallen short, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you begin the year like that, it's going to be a good year. V'am Rabbi Yitzchok, I will say this it almost feels unfair to have all of this in one daf. Right? It feels they should be spread over a month. Some Rabbi Yitzchok, ein danen esa adam el lefi masav sha'osa shah. But say Rabbi Yitzchok, now most of the Rishonim understand that this statement is a reference to Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yitzchok says a person is only judged according to where they're holding in that moment in life. Then I will say, what Rabbi Yitzchok is saying is as follows. The disadvantage that God has, so to speak, with judgment is what? He knows what's going to happen, right? He knows how the story ends. But yet, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges me, He doesn't judge me based on what's going to occur. He only judges me based on what? What is right now. What is right now? So the Gemara says, Shneimar, Kishama Elokim es kol anar ba'asher hu sham. The pasuk says HaKadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and heard the nar. Who is that? That's Yishmael. He heard Yishmael ba'asher hu sham, where Yishmael was holding at that moment. So we'll say Rashi quotes over here the incredible medrash that when Yishmael, remember this one, Avraham Avinu sent Yishmael away. Yishmael is dying from thirst, right? Hagar sends him tachas achas asichim, under the thorn bushes. The malachim are saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let him die, let him die. Do you know how much suffering, how much misfortune Yishmael and his descendants are going to cause Klal Yisrael? Let him die. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Malachim, tell me right now when you look at him, is it an innocent child or a culpable child? They said innocent child. Innocent child. Ein danen esa adam ela ba'asher hu sham. So that's what the pasuk says. Vayar Elokim ki sham Elokim asa kol anar ba'asher hu sham. Hashem heard the voice of the boy Yishmael ba'asher hu sham. Ba'asher hu sham is not a geographic statement. Ba'asher hu sham is a spiritual statement. At that point in time, Yishmael deserved HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rachamim, and therefore he receives it. Incredible. Rabbi Yitzchok, I just want to point out, according to many of the Rishonim, this is also by Rosh Hashanah. By Rosh Hashanah, there is a concept that judgment is based on how I conduct myself over Rosh Hashanah. So if on Rosh Hashanah I am a true Baal Tshuva, if on Rosh Hashanah I really do what I need to do to rectify myself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you could pull it together for 48 hours, I will judge you based on those 48 hours and not based on anything else. An incredible idea. There are three things, this is all incredible, three things which go ahead and bring up the din. I will say Avonosa means the sin of Adam. Three things that bring up the iniquity of man. What are they? Eloheim, Kir Natui, a slanted wall. So I'll say a slanted wall means you put yourself in a makom sakana. If a person puts themselves in a makom sakana, it must be because they think that they have requisite merit to save themselves. Really? You think you have requisite merit? Anytime you think you have requisite merit, that causes the Beis Din Shamal, the celestial court, to examine your karabah. So we'll have to stop over here. It's perfect. I just want to point out, we're right on schedule. Don't get worried over here. We're going to start tomorrow morning in Meretz Hashem at 5:45 as well, just so we have the opportunity. Well, don't worry, everything equals out. We'll say Shekayach in Meretz Hashem. This is for the next couple of days. We have dapim like this, so an incredible adventure ahead. Shekayach, everyone. Yankee.